joining us. We have a bunch of pizza, so please indulge. Otherwise, the Odell night crew will be really happy with this. So my name is Pete Eberle. I'm with the Colorado Renewable Energy Society. Anyone here never been to an event before? Okay, we got a couple. All right, I will do the spiel. Okay, so for those who don't know us, we're NCRES, the Colorado Renewable Energy Society. We were founded back in 1996, 501c3 nonprofit that obviously advocates and educates on all things sustainable energy as well as building energy and transportation when we feel like it. We have chapters up here in Fort Collins, down in Boulder County, Denver, Golden, and Springs. And we do monthly speaker events, usually sometimes webinars, sometimes in person. We also have a policy committee that consists of quite a few people. We've got former Excel, former NCRES, a ton of PhDs, a couple lawyers and whatnot, and they do work monitoring legislation, providing input to legislatures on good, bad, and different. And then we also have been really, really active at the PUC because we're lawyers. And so we've intervened on a number of things. We're involved in at least 3 dockets right now. We had a lot of work we did on the clean heat plan from Excel. And there's some if you heard the announcement of Lennar and Dandelion Energy deciding to put in a geothermal heating and cooling network for one of their new projects, the word on the street is, that's a direct result of the work we did, PSR and everyone else. I mean, Western Resource Advocates, everyone was pushing to make their plan a lot better because it was pretty lame when it came out. Anyway, so that's what we do. Go to crest-energy.org to sign up for the newsletter, and make sure to check out the YouTube channel. We've got Brian here is doing tons of work, so big hats off to Brian for helping get our 270-ish videos, or almost 70, 1.4 million views. So that's it's hard for me to think about the reach we're getting there. So before we kick off, a couple upcoming events. Next Tuesday, May 13th, 6:30, it's a webinar. We'll have Allison Jackson of the Colorado Agrivoltaic Learning Center talking about agrivoltaics, the synergy of agriculture and clean energy generation. So if you're not familiar with agrivoltaics, that'll be a really good, easy one. It's a topic we kind of feature over and over again. Great solution when you have land use concerns. Then on Thursday, May 15th, 6:30 p.m., down in Denver at the Odell 5 Points Tap Room at 6:30. We'll be decarbonizing heating and manufacturing and other medium temperature applications with Blair Wilcox. He's the head of Current Tech Energy, and they're a thermal decarbonization consulting firm. That'll be a hybrid event, so it will be live streaming. So if you don't want to go down to Denver, you can hop online. And then on Tuesday, May the 20th, just talked about all the policy work. We're going to have a bunch of folks for an update on everything that happened in this legislative session and all the current things we're doing at the PUC. I haven't announced that, we've gotten that one out yet, but it'll be out on the website here pretty soon. Brad Smith, Fort Collins Utilities.
All right, thanks Pete. Brad Smith, Project Manager, City of Fort Collins Utilities. My work is almost exclusively building energy codes. I've been doing this for a number of years. Been with utilities for closing in on 9 years now. Before that, I was a consultant running around out in the field, working with builders, modeling homes, et cetera, et cetera. And then also had a stint doing existing homes, doing assessments on existing homes. So I have seen a lot of stuff, good and bad. So let's jump into it. I do have one person here. I want to, Kimberly, raise your hands. This is Kimberly Stein. Kimberly works with me. She's project coordinator on this project. So I think I'll just sit down, let Kimberly take it from here. Or some of the other faces in the room. I see quite a few familiar faces and some people that are part of our community advisory group that is part of this project. So I could almost hand it over to them as well. So important, I guess, to start off before we dive into the meat and potatoes of this. A big part of this work, not only are we kind of developing zero carbon methodologies for targets and then code language that goes with it, but really doing some engagement with the community. So we've stood up a community advisory group to kind of inform us and kind of help us address some of the questions that come up as the work puts together. They may not know it yet, but we're getting pretty close, probably within the next month to 6 weeks of looking more in depth at some of the code language that's going to come out of this. So it's all kind of starting to tie together. I will apologize if this gets a little wonky here. Right now we've done a lot of work, but it isn't super pulled together and polished just yet. So I'm going to show you a lot of stuff on how we got to where we're at and what those targets look like. We're going to make it all pretty and shiny probably within the next couple months as we prepare for code review committee and then community engagement, ultimately getting prepared to bring it to council for adoption, consideration for adoption. So I always like to start off with this just because a lot of this work I say really is to kind of hopefully trigger kind of a paradigm shift in the way we build. That's the idea behind this, right? Getting people thinking a little bit differently in how we construct homes and buildings. So I think that's necessary if we're really going to reach for zero carbon or zero energy in the future. And it's also something that is a bit of a hurdle for us. It's an industry that doesn't like change and sometimes is tough to move and be really nimble. So we're hoping that this project alone provides some benefit in terms of, certainly transparency, affordability, predictability. These are all things that we talk about when we describe this. And I think in some way we can maybe start to address affordability if we kind of look outside the box a little bit with this project. So yes, we're going to be building better homes, but we should be able to put some things in place that allow the building industry to kind of find their own path to meeting these codes and targets and finding something that works for them. And it might look different for one builder to the next builder, but hopefully they find their way through it. All right, so let's jump into it. I think this is one of the things that I started off just because it's important to kind of really set the stage for what this really is. This is effectively new construction. I think some of you have probably heard of building performance standards. Benchmarking is a program that supports building performance standards. That's really existing buildings. This is new construction specifically. It's also a project that kind of meets the desires of the community. This came from engagement, and we'll get to another slide. Engagement with the community in formation of our climate future. So there were some things that come out of that, and we've kind of put some things together as we kind of move forward into what's effectively Big Move 6, centered around buildings. It's also, I kind of mentioned this, it's a transparent, flexible approach to building. We'll get to that. So kind of moving away from the prescriptive path a little bit. It's also innovative. I'll explain a little more about that too as we get into it and where we got some of the funding for that, because it is innovative. What this project isn't, I often get asked about this, it's zero carbon, so you can kind of read the tea leaves, right? It is not a ban on gas. That seems to be what most people go to right away. What will likely happen is there'll be a shift away from it as people start modeling and figuring out how to do this. But we're not banning anything. It's going to hopefully create a little bit of a market transition over time. Also not building performance standards. It's not a restricted building code approach. I talked about going away from prescriptive path. And it's not a foregone conclusion. We'll touch upon that in a little bit too as we get deeper into some of the slides. So, okay. Laying the foundation a little bit, just understanding where we're starting from. State of Colorado. State of Colorado is, for those people that don't know, is considered a home rule state. That means we have no adopted state building code, home rule. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, let's talk about that. Now, is it a home rule state or is it? So it's important to know that a home rule state allows each jurisdiction to adopt whatever code they want and amend that code as they see fit. All of these other states cannot do that. Now, I mentioned, or is it? So there have been some things that have come down through Colorado State Legislature. House Bills 19-1260 adopted in 2019 means that if you're adopting a building code, you have to at least adopt an energy code that is one of the 3 most recent energy codes. So now are we fully home rule, or are we telling people what you have to adopt? Not a bad thing, though. Also, House Bill 22-1362, Building Greenhouse Gas Emissions Project. I'm part of the State Energy Code Board, and we have written and now put in place for any jurisdiction adopting a code, they have to adopt an electric vehicle, a PV, and electric ready codes. They have to implement that into their energy code. Also, what's coming July 1 of 2026, low energy and low carbon code. We're in development right now. I believe we have draft out for public comment, or I think they just closed public comment number 2 on that, so getting close to having that code developed. Also the same thing, we're building off of the 2024 International Energy Conservation Code, and we're kind of moving it to align with some of the state's climate initiatives. And then lastly, eventually there'll be a model green code that's developed by that same State of Colorado Energy Code Board for jurisdictions that want to, I guess, stretch or reach a little bit further than whatever this code is once it's adopted. So, energy code adoption, let's talk about building code. So most people, I have to be careful, so it's like I usually just talk in these circles, everybody knows all this stuff. So there's a body of codes called the International Codes, developed by the International Code Council, and they publish a code every 3 years, so the code gets updated every 3 years. Not all jurisdictions update their codes every 3 years. Some update every 6 years, some update every 9 years, et cetera, et cetera. So the City of Fort Collins adopts code every 3 years on a regular cycle, and it's actually written within our policy to adopt the International Energy Conservation Code within 1 year of issuance. So that's part of our climate future, that plan. To set the stage, I guess, for where we're at, 2024 code, technically it's 2025, but we're in a code year. We're adopting code this year, hopefully at some point. We'll be bringing it to council for a consideration of adoption. That International Energy Conservation Code was finalized in August of 2024. The rest of the body of codes, this is the green one right here, the energy code, the rest of the body of codes was finalized in March. But there was a little bit of back and forth with some people that maybe were in some groups that were in opposition to that. So there's some challenges and appeals, and it had to go through a whole process. So it delayed things several months. Did you have a question?
When you're talking about these building codes, are you talking about all types of construction, warehouses, office buildings, and everything?
Yes.
So whether you're building a house or you're building a skyscraper
Yep.
or a warehouse, you're covering all of that?
Yeah. So IBC, International Building Code, is commercial buildings. Within this book, there's a whole slew of classification of buildings. Warehouses, high-rise, multifamily, ambulatory, all of those things. International Residential Code typically governs residential buildings, single-family, detached, attached, and 3 stories or less multifamily buildings. And then you got things like mechanical code, plumbing code, fuel gas code, et cetera, and then energy code, of course, the most important one. All right, so we're going to adopt, hopefully adopt this year, and we do this every 3 years. So there really are 3 different ways you can do it. I'm going to go through this pretty quick. Open hearing means anybody can bring and suggest a code. So anybody in this room, if we were, following an open hearing process, could I submit this as code language for this section or whatever. There's also a private process. This means that city staff will comb through the code and then just bring it towards adoption. City of Fort Collins is sort of somewhere in between. We do this. We're in the middle of doing this right now. We've taken all of the International Energy Conservation Code as an example. I'm amending that right now to kind of align with our work. And then also developing what we're going to go through here in a little bit that's going to sit on top of that. And then we're going to circle back with some folks, Code Review Committee, and as some of the folks in the room know, bringing this forward to a community advisory group. So we'll be reviewing what we're developing with that group and getting some feedback on what this, ultimately this code might look like. All right, so this is something that most people are not aware of if they're not living in the code world as well. There are really 4 ways you can comply with energy code. There's a prescriptive approach. That's basically just saying, thou shalt build with these windows, thou shalt build with this insulation in your walls, this insulation in your ceiling, et cetera, et cetera. There's UA alternative. That's also kind of a modeling approach. So you're modeling a building, you begin to model a building to a UA score. So really important to recognize that these all are modeling paths. Then there's kind of this performance path. This performance path on both the commercial and residential side, you're modeling to an annual energy cost. And as long as you don't exceed that annual energy cost, you're in compliance. So they're usually hiring an energy consultant, putting together an energy model, and then submitting that to the building department to demonstrate compliance for permit.
What is UA?
UA is, think of it like almost like the inverse of an R value. So if you take a U factor of a wall, so a UA is effectively those inverse of R's across an entire assembly. So like a wall assembly, etc. Well, here, UA is used to measure whole building heat loss. Ken.
I'm noticing that these requirements, you may not exceed the code baseline. Am I understanding that correctly, that you can't build a more energy efficient building than what?
Sorry, you can't be worse than.
Okay.
So, yeah, so here, as an example, this sets an annual energy cost. So you're building a house, it's this many square feet. This is the annual energy cost. You cannot exceed that. So
okay.
you can build the building however you want. You figure out
you can't exceed
but
the
if it models out so that it's $1 more,
okay,
then that annual energy like that gets kicked back.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, the report spits out, says not in compliance.
Okay.
So this kind of does the same thing. ERI gives effectively an energy score. ASHRAE 90.1 has an energy cost budget method, which is very similar to this, and ASHRAE 90.1 is commercial. So really the important thing here is like we're modeling buildings for performance. Like we're building assemblies in software, in a modeling application, and it's spitting out outputs that tell us how that building is going to perform. That's really important for this project. So we are pursuing this sort of path. We're going to move away from the traditional prescriptive path. There's a very important reason for that. We're going to get to that here in just a second. So one of the things is this allows you to just do whatever you want. Figure out how you're going to build a building. There are some backstops in there. So as a matter of fact, you cannot meet code by slapping a bunch of solar on here. So there is a backstop for the envelope performance. Do you have any question?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
As far as the building department's concerned, you're saying there'll be more flexibility. Does that mean that rather than looking at the letter of a code, you're going to be examining the intent that the builder is working on, and if they're matching the intent of the code that you advised or devised?
My project or this, just this approach?
This
approach. So when you model this, it spits out a compliance document in a report packet.
Okay.
In that report packet as well, there is a checklist that explains, I'm building my walls this way. I'm putting these windows, this value of windows in. I'm going to insulate my slab on grade this way. My ceiling is going to have this much insulation in there. Now, they're free to change all those things, and that's the benefit to this, is you've got that flexibility. I don't want to do windows this way, so maybe I put more insulation in the attic, or maybe I insulate my foundation better, and it's that trade-off, as long as it doesn't exceed that annual energy cost.
Okay.
So, another really important part of this is this gives us energy use. People are modeling, and it tells us therms and kilowatt hours. So that's really important for us because we are trying to figure out how we lower those. And this allows us to kind of plan this code that we're going to go through into the future. So real energy outcomes, kilowatt hours and therms. Now the most important part out of all of this is right now, if we move to this and we move away from the traditional energy cost compliance approach, we can begin to fuel debias the code. So right now, a lot of these modeling paths are looking at energy cost, and heating, space heating and water heating with fuel is about 2.5 times less expensive than electricity. So the code in itself is a little bit biased towards fuel. So we want to move away from that. It also provides some data-informed decision-making. So we're going to get a whole bunch of models that give us all of this data. So we're going to know what people are building. We're going to be able to calculate CO2 emissions off of modeling reports. Okay. Hopefully some people are familiar with this, Our Climate Future. And raise your hand. Hopefully some folks have heard of this. Oh, good. Thank you. City of Fort Collins climate initiatives are wrapped into Our Climate Future, made of 13 big moves. One of those big moves is big move 6, efficient emissions-free buildings. This is really important. This is where this body of work sits. Within that big move 6, there's a whole bunch of supporting moves, or what we call almost like next moves. One of those, efficient emissions-free buildings 2, line item 2, is to develop, an energy performance path for new construction to zero carbon by 2030. So that's where this work came from. It's also, as I mentioned, kind of born out of this. This is engagement with the community. The community asked for this in a roundabout way. What should we be doing with our buildings? And then we wrapped all that feedback up into developing all of these moves and supporting moves. So not specifically just a city plan. We are not just like ramming this down people's throats. This came from the community. Give it a little bit of a timeline here. This is what things look like. Some of the work that's been happening, we are right here developing an energy code step towards net zero carbon, plan for adoption this year, assuming all goes well and council gives the thumbs up. So started in 2024, this work did. So once we started pursuing this, guess what popped up? A funding opportunity. So U.S. Department of Energy had, through the IIJA and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, an opportunity to apply for what's called a RECI, R-E-C-I, Resilient and Efficient Codes Implementation Grant. We applied for that, and on the initial round of awards, there was a total of $45 million to be dispersed amongst any number of applicants that were awarded. There were 27 awards under the first round of this funding opportunity. We were the only jurisdiction to get that award. So, and the focus of this is really, yeah. You clap now, and look at the mess I'm dealing with the federal government. We are still awaiting our first reimbursement check. But it's coming. I got word today that it's coming. So even word today, which is a really good thing. So it really focused on this: state and local code adoption, workforce development, implementation and compliance, innovative approaches, equity, energy and environmental justice, and partnerships. So the key to this was ready to advance building energy codes and other building efficiency policies within a particular region, state, or local jurisdiction. So, all right. So I kind of jumped ahead a little bit. Ta-da, we won, yay. So we were awarded July 12th of 2023. We got just under $700,000 to do this work. It's going to span about 4.5 years in total. There's 3 budget periods. Right now we're in budget period 1, that ends September. I don't know what's going to happen with budget period 2. We're crossing our fingers and toes, but we're going to apply for a continuation. June, July, I think is the date. I have to look at when that is. It's coming up. But we'll see what happens. Maybe it'll continue. So in order to do this, we had to, this was our technical summary. So what we were going to do, develop a methodology that establishes energy use intensity. So basically kBTU per square foot. So we're taking kilowatt hours, we're taking therms, we're converting into kBTU, and then we're applying that to a square foot of a building area. We're also formed a stakeholder group. I mentioned that, the community advisor group that Kimberly is leading. We've had 4 of those right now and had some really good discussions. We're also going to document, this is why I think DOE was so interested. We're going to document baseline performance from utility analysis, including our benchmarking data, our building energy and water scoring data. So we are a municipal utility, so what do we have? We have data. So that's a big benefit. Most jurisdictions and most people adopting code don't have access to that, but we do. So when they say, can you get access to all of your building permits and tell us what you're building? Yes, we can do that. Can you also reference that against building energy use by a specific address? Yes, we can. So they're, all right, mind blown. So what that means is really, we can probably pull this off where most places around the country can't. We can at least be a demonstration of how this could be implemented in other jurisdictions. And then develop and adopt performance code in Fort Collins. This is kind of timeline, and then implementation guide and trainings go along with it. And then evaluate the effectiveness. This is the key. So we're going to model performance. People are going to submit that for permit. They're going to go build those homes and buildings. And then once people are living in them for a year, year and a half, 2 years, we'll be able to go back and look at utility use and analyze, are we actually close to what this building modeled out at? Are we getting there? Are we close? Ken?
What was the value that you're trying to convert EIUs and CO2 targets into?
KBTU?
Yeah, KBTUs.
Yeah.
What is that?
BTUs, 1,000 BTUs. Like
Okay,
KBTU.
1,000 BTUs.
Yeah, yeah. So think of it like this, like your furnace. Most people are familiar with the furnace. Like it'll be like 60,000 BTUs. Same type of thing. British thermal units, burning gas, converting into energy, etc. So I'm not smart enough to do this by myself. So 1 second, let me get through this and then I'll grab you really quick. So it's like, okay, let's go get some money and then hire a team of people to do it. I had some relationships with a lot of these folks. Florida Solar Energy Center, we've already kind of provided some utility, kind of scrubbed utility data for them to do another DOE project, so I had that relationship built with them already. We work with New Buildings Institute from time to time. They're just a bunch of really smart people that do a lot of analysis. And then International Code Council. So those are the people that develop the code. They're very familiar with code language and how to implement. And then Colorado Energy Office is our supporting state agency. So Colorado Energy Office has interest in this because they'd like to roll this out as sort of a stretch code. I mentioned early on, there's that model green code that's coming. This may sit adjacent to that as something that they could roll out at the state level and other jurisdictions pick it up. After all, we are planning to put together an implementation guide and training. It's like, how do we do this? Okay, I'm going to start moving a little bit faster so we don't get too far.
Mac here.
Yes, go ahead.
Are you able to access some natural gas data, or is that
That's a great question. So we had some. Then we leaned on Pacific Northwest National Laboratories. I didn't realize till we started this project, we had access to PNNL, Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. They have like a ton of data for this region and gas data. So they were able to work with us and kind of give us sort of that, in a way, some level of aggregated data now, I will say, it's not perfect, but it's pretty darn close. They were pretty confident that they could get us close enough to begin year one getting us somewhat accurate targets. But that's a really good question. We are not a gas utility. So we took some of what we had over the code years, we kind of baselined it. This is kind of where we're at. We're going to hold flat. But then it's like, how do we reach out and get more? We had partners in energy, relationship with Xcel Energy, but that kind of just dropped off over the past couple of years, basically about the time this project started, and they weren't able to share. They did share some initial gas data with us when we were talking to Florida Solar Energy Center from a previous analysis that they'd done for another DOE study, so they had some data as well. So we just didn't have like 2021 code data, and we had a little bit of 2018 code data. We had a fair amount of 2012 and 2015 code gas data, but we had to fill in the gaps somewhere. So not perfect, but pretty darn close, I think. Okay, so this is just kind of a timeline. I'm going to breeze through this really fast. This is kind of what it looks like. We've developed targets. We're developing the code language right now. We'll then be putting this implementation guide and training offerings in place. These have kind of shifted a little bit. I mentioned the federal government. Who remembers payment pause of all that kind of stuff? So that kind of screwed this project up for a few weeks. So we had one of our partners just pump the brakes. So we're kind of picking steam up a little bit. So I kind of say we're like maybe a month and a half behind where I would like to be right now, but that's still not too bad. Eventually we're going to come before the community. We meet with boards and commissions and then eventually bring it to council for consideration for adoption. And then we start getting into fourth quarter 26 through second quarter 2027, where we're starting to find out how many of those buildings and homes have been occupied and what data can we get out of those to kind of measure the effectiveness of these compliance reports, modeling, and make sure that we're actually performing as we think they're going to perform. So, all right. This is just really quick. This is not Fort Collins specifically. This is just kind of an estimate of what we say like improvement of energy code over the years. So green is commercial, this is residential right here. So you can kind of see what we've been doing nationally over the past several code cycles. We had a little period right here where we didn't pick up any efficiency at all. So big jump right here, 2012 code, 2009 to 2012, and then we kind of stayed flat. There was some resistance here. We kind of picked back up again through a little bit of a grassroots effort and local government engagement under the 2021 code. And this gives you kind of an idea of something that PNNL, Pacific Northwest National Labs, put together of what it might look like nationwide for people to kind of like, where do we need to go where we can begin to think about offsetting energy use with rooftop PV or renewable energy. So again, not very specific to Fort Collins. We'll get to that here in just a second. But you can kind of see where nationwide, this is about where we're at across all climate zones, cities, towns, whatever. And this kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of what we're projecting the 2024 code looks like. So you can kind of see 2027, 2030, like, boy, even to get down to here, is the International Energy Conservation Code from the ICC going to get us there? The answer is no, of course not. So, you know, there's probably not, you know, any time in the near future that we can expect that the national code is going to get us to like a zero energy or zero carbon code. So this is why we're doing the work we're doing. Now, to get a little more specific, this is blue columns right here are City of Fort Collins data. So this is how our homes through data analysis have performed over the different code years. The good thing is, this is thankfully for me, when I see this, I'm like, okay, the code that we're putting in place, and I'm, you know, often largely responsible for compliance and training and education and things like that, and even writing some of the code. Are we actually reducing energy use in homes every time we do this? So this was a bit of a whew to see this. Okay, we are, every time we adopt a code and we get a little bit more aggressive with it, or the code improves, we are lowering energy use in homes in Fort Collins. So one important thing to do, or to notice here under the 2018 code, the state of Colorado did an energy code field study. So they did kind of their own analysis right here. And this is where the state average for Climate Zone 5B, where Climate Zone 5B came in. They came in at about a 32 EUI, energy use, or KBTU per square foot per home. City of Fort Collins homes were about a 27 point something. I can't remember the actual number right now. So the good thing is, we're outperforming most other people that are building to the 2018 code in the same climate zone in the state. That's a good thing. 2021 code, we just got this recent data. This is about where we fall. I would have liked to have seen this a little bit lower. From what we're developing right now, we're expecting the 24 code to land somewhere around here. And we'll get to this in a little bit of in a couple of slides. And then this is sort of hypothetical trajectory. So don't pay much attention to this because these could go up and down. But this gives you kind of an idea of what this might look like. So ultimately we land on the 2030 code, which we will adopt in 2031. Renewable energy will offset the entirety of the energy use in homes and buildings and take us down to zero energy, zero carbon. Making sense so far? Mm-hmm. Jim?
Is that chart just for new builds or all buildings?
This is new builds.
Gotcha.
So each time we adopt a code, those buildings, or well, these homes, residential homes, built under that code.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Did you have a question?
Why did 2009 shoot up?
That's a great question. What happened just prior to 2009?
The Great Recession.
Yeah, housing downturn. So this was really interesting for me to dive into this data and see this. I love talking about this, so that's a great question. So here we are, 2006 code. We were building homes 2007, 2008. We got to about this time, and our permits just tanked. Like, boy, 125 homes a year or something like that in Fort Collins. And typically we could build anywhere from 300, 350 to 400 to 600 homes in a year. We went from building about 150 homes a year with the very next year when we started coming out of this, which landed us in the 2009 code, which wasn't 2009, it was 2011 or 12 or something like that, when homes were being built to this. We went from about 150 homes, permits in 1 year, to over 700 the next year. We didn't have the workforce, we didn't have building inspection, we did not have the ability to keep up with that in that amount of time. That's the only thing I can figure. Was the workforce just wasn't prepared. It's just like, just give me bodies, we just got to build homes, like whatever we got. It just went gangbusters coming out of the housing downturn. So really interesting to see that and for you to recognize that.
So Brad, those are actual figures then?
Yeah.
So you're saying that the build quality was lower because all of a sudden we're building.
I mean, that's all I can figure.
That's your
right?
hypothesis, but they're actual, not models.
Yeah,
Actual
yeah.
usage.
I mean, and you know how it works. I think most people in here understand housing downturn, builders are laying people off. And very next year, within a matter of months, 150 permits to over 700. They don't have the work for. How do you hire people and train and get people to build, that quickly? And right now we do 300-400 homes a year. So even 700 is like exceptional in Fort Collins. Just went bonkers. Okay, so we got a project we're going to start. We're going to work on this. We now have money. We've got some partners. One of the big things that we need to do up front was define what is a zero carbon new building or a new home. One, it has to be energy efficient. So we don't want to put solar on a barn, so we need to build a really robust envelope. That lowers building loads. That's a really good thing. Also needs to be free of on-site GHG emissions from energy use. Needs to be powered by 100% non-carbon energy. Platte River Power Authority is moving in that direction. We can touch on this in a little bit. And then we also need the ability to utilize demand response in these buildings. We have a demand response program in Fort Collins. If some of you aren't familiar with that, it allows us to have some people that volunteer for water heaters and thermostats, and we can kind of control energy use, like when that thermostat runs and when that water heater runs. Did you have a question?
In the past, when looking at things in other places, the problem turned out to be the architects, because many architects were not enough familiar with what needed to be done that they could actually design the buildings to do it. They just weren't familiar with it. Do you have any sort of a program aimed at architects who might be designing, I think most is residential, but designing buildings in general so that they'll have an understanding far enough advanced of just what's coming?
Yeah. So first off, there's an architect directly behind you, by the way, so be careful. He's a really nice guy, though, so lucky you. We are putting some things in place. Part of this project was workforce training and development. So one of the things that we have done is kind of put together a building industry scholarship. So we're looking to kind of expand those offerings and get people in front of this. So we have really good training resources up and down the Front Range here in Colorado. We've got Passive House Network. We have somebody that trains out of Denver on Passive House. We have Construction Instruction that does a lot of really good courses on high performance buildings and net zero energy buildings just down in the Denver area as well. So trying to get people in front of that, and we're putting dollars behind that to get people educated on that stuff. And I think there are a lot of pretty good resources out there right now, and I think we are starting to see a lot of the architects really kind of lean into this a little bit. I think they know this is coming. So I wouldn't single out architects only, but yes, they are putting the plans together and then somebody's following those plans to build. So absolutely. Yeah, it's a good question. That's really where it all starts.
May I ask the architect a question?
Yeah.
All right.
He's a handsome guy in a hat directly behind me.
Is there a requirement?
Not to put you on the spot,
for
Gary, but
architects to when maintaining their licenses, do they have responsibility to take educational programs on a regular basis, so that this will be covered at such a time?
We're probably getting off topic, but yes, the short answer is yes, but it doesn't necessarily teach you how to build energy efficient homes. It teaches you a lot of diverse things. But I would say just quickly, most architects that I know of are on board. There's many that aren't, but it's hard for the architects to get the rest of the team, the clients, the builders, everybody else all aligned as well. So,
yeah, that's a good point, really good point. Okay. So we know kind of where, what we've kind of defined as a zero carbon building. The next is like, okay, we're going to figure out some target setting and how do we get there. So first things, just really quick slide, alignment with our climate future, right? That really tells us where we're going. So the next thing is highly efficient buildings. I mentioned we don't want to put solar on a barn. We want to have a really good, robust envelope. That's what lowers the loads of the buildings. That's what makes like electrification work here too. So the better built the building, the lower the load, the easier it is to look at technology like heat pumps, especially cold climate heat pumps. And then of course electrification. This is a city council priority to pursue this. And then I kind of mentioned grid interactivity. We have some pilot programs at work right now for EVs, and we're doing some demand response stuff. So really a critical thing. So the grid becomes more of a smart grid in the future, if that makes sense. So I want to introduce you to kind of the project team and what this kind of looks like a little bit. International Code Council. This is kind of the role of them. So they're going to assist the team in the development of the draft code language. We started this right now, so they're kind of like, you know, working through their Word docs right now and kind of crafting that code language. They really needed us to kind of get through the first part of that, and that was the methodologies that established the targets for energy use, the EUI or kBTU per square foot, and then the CO2e or carbon reduction targets as well. They're also experts on the 2024 code, which we're building off of, and they're going to assist us in the implementation guide and training materials, so once we get through adoption. U Buildings Institute, we hired U Buildings Institute to do the commercial analysis for us, help us do the analysis of commercial buildings, and then also develop the methodologies that set the targets for us. Starting with this, we can go to this slide really quick. This is just their work. This is how it kicks off. So the first thing we had to do is determine what our building stock looks like. This is kind of an idea of what percent of metered Fort Collins building stock looks like. So one of the things that's really important here, that as I was looking at this and looking back through the data, is we had a bit of a fall off with commercial buildings during the COVID years. So we would typically build about 30 commercial buildings in Fort Collins per year, but during COVID that we dropped by about 2/3, and we haven't got back up to about 30 buildings a year. So we're slowly moving. What happened was everybody just paused projects at that time. And then it took people, you know, when you pause a big project that's going to take a year or 2 years to build, often imagine a big multifamily building, you pause that, maybe you've started moving dirt or something like that, but you haven't done underground work and foundation and standing the thing up. Things sit for a little while. It takes a little while to catch back up. So, you know, you lose a few months there and it pushes things out. So now we're building to a new code and et cetera, et cetera. So what happened was we just lost those number of buildings. So when we started doing this analysis and looking at, you know, what the energy use was for the 2012 code, the 2015 code, the 2018 code in these buildings, and looking for the 21 code, we're like, wow, we don't have hardly any buildings under the 21 code. So people were still building to the 2018 code because all those projects got paused in 2020. That had fallen under the 2018 code. So we needed to first establish what our building stock looked like. That was really important. You can see there's a lot of stuff we just don't build much of, or at least over that stretch of code year. The next thing was take kind of our benchmark data and figure out where buildings start at. So this is really kind of an idea of building types and what we have in the city of Fort Collins. And you can see here's multifamily, pretty large multifamily. This is typically like you may go in and see like out there on I-25 in Harmony, like a whole number of multifamily buildings. So pretty significant amount of square footage. So really understanding our building stock so we can then take a look at the benchmarking data that we have, the reported energy use for those buildings, and start to apply it to this project. So one of the other things that we did was really look for how do we begin target setting in these. So we could do a measured approach, we could do a model approach, and we could do market research. And we've done a little of each one of those things. So we took some model buildings, we took some measured buildings like energy use per square foot, and then we did market research on those. And this was all done by New Buildings Institute, but really started reaching out across the country and looking at buildings in our climate zone that were built to similar code. And then also we're high performance buildings, so really getting an idea of what that looks like that we can kind of start to compare our building set to. Here's just a really geeky, horrible graph right now. They first showed me this and I was like, you gotta be kidding me, what does this mean? But the important thing here is as we took all those approaches and we started looking at applying them to our building types, this gives you a really good example of like where we could, what we thought was begin to set targets with some level of confidence. So we knew that across all these and our building stock, we have pretty tight alignment here. So we thought, at that point, it's pretty safe to kind of use this to set kind of a target of where our City of Fort Collins buildings were going to land. Some of this stuff was like way out there, obviously, this kind of stuff. So you then start looking at like, where do we kind of set some of these targets in the future? Like, what is this going to look like? But some of the stuff that, is really tight gave us a ton of confidence to just rely on the data that we had and that we should be able to align it with all of these across our building stock. So what that means, we took all that and we kind of landed at our 2030 targets for net zero. We're calling net zero performance in Fort Collins. We're still on energy, mind you, kBTU per square foot. And it gives you kind of an idea of what these targets look like right now. So this is 2030 targets. So really good example, a mid-rise apartment. I can't remember if I have this in a coming slide, but we're working with a builder right now to kind of model the 24 code, see what this looks like. This mid-rise apartment right now, our base 21 energy code came in at about 31, so kBTU per square foot. So by 2030, we're hoping that we can get that building down to about a 24, and then we can set enough renewable energy to offset the energy use of that building. 2024 code, we're expecting that 31 to drop to about a 29. So not a huge drop, but still, 29 is, when you start talking about energy use per square foot, not insignificant either.
That includes electricity?
What's that?
That includes electricity?
Yes. Yep. Okay, so targets. We now have targets of energy use per square foot. This is kind of what it looks like across all of the different building classifications. Somebody earlier asked about, like, is this take into account all the different building types? It does on the commercial building side. So large office, medium office, small office, etc. This sort of sets a trajectory. This is where we're at. This tall column is where we're at. This is kind of the trajectory that we're expecting to have to reach in certain building types. Some it's going to be easier than others. Some are starting off pretty low, and some we think just medium office, looking at the energy use of medium office buildings, they may not have to reach as far to reach some of these targets. Okay, moving right along. All right, so based off of that, we then begin to set CO2e targets, so carbon emission targets. These are the carbon targets that we've developed for those buildings. So correspond with, we talked about a mid-rise apartment, so 0.003 CO2e per square foot. So this will be sort of the carbon target that those buildings will have to meet. We'll rely on the modeling firms to do the analysis of this. In their modeling, they know how to do this. They've been doing this for several years now, so it shouldn't be that big of a deal. We'll also put something in place to allow them to calculate some of these carbon targets, so some of the firms that might not be as familiar with it. So this is a really important thing right here. What does this look like? I think total performance improvement, you can kind of see over the next 3 code cycles, 2024, which we haven't adopted yet, hoping to adopt this year, 2027, and 2030. So really, we've got 6.5-ish years to make, in a mid-rise apartment, about a 23% improvement in energy use. Not insignificant. This is the percent improvement per code cycle. The important thing here is, on that previous slide where we did this analysis of a whole bunch of buildings all across the country in similar climate zones, similar codes, similar building types, what was achievable? And what we found is that across all these, we're about a 10 to 11% improvement across all commercial buildings citywide. It's important to note that the International Energy Conservation Code on the commercial side tracks at about a 5 to 8% improvement every time they adopt code. So we're pushing maybe an extra 2 or 3% beyond that each code cycle. Again, builders are going to have to think about it. It's not insignificant, but it's not unachievable, we think. Questions? Throwing a lot of numbers at people. Fun stuff. Okay, so one really important is when we're considering this is grid emissions factors. So some in the room may know a little bit about this, and it's important to understand like how clean is our grid, and this is one big benefit is City of Fort Collins grid is pretty darn clean. That's a whole other reason that kind of shows that we should be able to do this. So right now we kind of developed this, we were working on this, and I'll get to this in a second, but this is kind of the grid emission intensity or grid factors, emissions factors that is available to us from a number of different, usually through NREL, National Renewable Energy Lab. So we relied on some of these in doing our initial calculations, and then we kind of circled back and we're like, well, let's look at City of Fort Collins grid and how do we compare to that? And that's really important because the cleaner our grid is, the less we have to push on our buildings in terms of lowering energy use. Think of it this way, the cleaner our grid is, the easier it is, smaller PV system or renewable energy can offset the energy use of that building to bring it down to zero emissions. So we circled back and we did our own kind of analysis. We have a data wrangler that works for us, his term. We've kind of given it to him, but I think he runs with it. Figuring out where our grid is. So this gives you kind of an idea of Platte River Power Authority with and without renewables, where we're tracking right now. So it's important to understand, like here, year 2026, we have a pretty big project coming on, Black Hollow renewable energy project that's going to land in 2026. And you can kind of see this emissions factor right here from 0.40 drops to a 0.22. That's the grid getting cleaner. If everything tracks all of the other projects that they have planned, not in the works yet, we should be by 2030, and I don't want to get into the whole aeroderivative thing,
Yes.
but we should be able to, with City of Fort Collins, track at about a zero. The important thing to note is a lot of this is set with renewable energy credits. So City of Fort Collins, the lower our use, the more renewables are on the grid, the more renewable energy credits that we have to offset carbon use. So, but what we've done right now is we've kind of kept this at effectively, without anything else coming online, without PRPA renewables, at a 0.30. So we're kind of tracking right here. But the nice thing about this is under the 2024 code, we're going to be able to really effectively establish a grid emissions factor that's going to be a little more improved over this. So what that means is we think it's more accurate to Fort Collins, and it means that we're not going to have to push as hard on our commercial buildings. So, and hopefully we get to here because we should be able to pretty easily manage that in improvement of building performance. Okay. Oh yeah. I was going to say it's hard to read, so I kind of did a little thing up here. So ultimately getting to zero, but this is the emission factor without any other stuff coming online. Florida Solar Energy Center is tackling all of our commercial or our residential homes for us. So they're doing the analysis on that. I'm going to go through this pretty fast because of time. So one of the things that we decided to do is use ResNet Carbon Index. This is a way to energy model. ResNet is an organization that certifies energy raters, and those raters go out and they model homes for performance. So we're going to rely on their HERS carbon index. It's electricity generation carbon emissions tied to time of use. That's really important. Fuel mix on the grid varies. Relies on NCRES forward-looking hourly electricity generation emission rate data. And it allows us to kind of project and average out to from year 2025 to 2050, so we know what the emissions factors are going to be on the grid over the course of those years. Home fossil fuel appliance emissions are not dependent on time of day. We'll see this on a slide here in just a second of what that really means. And then the ResNet COE2E index accompanies the energy rating index. That was one of the performance paths that I mentioned earlier, where again, we're modeling for performance. So somebody's going to model that house before it's built, and we should have an idea of how much energy that home is going to use before it's even built. Then lastly, CO2e, carbon dioxide equivalent. CO2e, for those that don't know, is just accounts for all greenhouse gas emissions, not just CO2. So this is just kind of what that HERS, ResNet's HERS carbon index looks like. Ultimately, we're looking for a zero. A zero carbon home would start at 100 and go down to a zero for an all-electric home that has no emissions. Very similar to the HERS index, this is really important to note. So over 50% of all the homes built in Fort Collins utilize this path for construction. So something builders are very familiar with, and we do have industry workforce that can support this. One important thing here, this does not address embodied carbon. I get this question from time to time. It is something we will probably consider in the future. If we're going to tackle it, we'll probably tackle, maybe start to look at that under the 27 code, and we'll probably tackle the big two, concrete and steel. Mm-hmm. So those are the ones that I think it's easier to kind of get some sort of standardized embodied carbon calculation for. I think there are people starting to do that work, but it's, I would say, a little bit in its infancy still right now. Talked about time of day and energy use during that period. So this is just an emissions rate, so you can kind of see here, middle of the day, we're not using as much energy as we are later in the day. This is kind of also reflected in this. This is really kind of an interesting slide because it gives you an idea of the difference in emissions of a natural gas furnace versus an electric heat pump. So what we see happening here, we think, is just probably middle of the day when the sun was shining. So it's a nice, bright, sunny Fort Collins day. So probably not a lot of heating occurring during that time, but you can see natural gas furnace versus an electric heat pump, hopefully a cold climate heat pump, but the emissions are about halved. So it's very important for us to kind of move in that direction. So heat pumps are going to play a really important role in a lot of the code up and down the Front Range in the coming years. So really important here. So typically what we're seeing right now, homes built, natural gas appliances under the 21 code, we're seeing a HERS index score of probably around 50, 55 or something like that. We're really going to do this and get a zero. We got to go way down here. So that means we got to improve the building envelope quite a bit, and then we got to put a bunch of renewable energy on it to take that thing below a zero HERS index score. One of the things that we're considering is, yes, this will require some either energy storage or renewables. That I think that's kind of a given. On-site renewables are more affordable than batteries, so we're considering all that. What does that look like? And then one of the things, a pilot that we're doing in the city of Fort Collins, 2-way EV charging might be considered a storage method, kind of to let us offset when that peak energy use is happening. So, and then more solar required for larger homes, obviously, larger energy use, larger PV. Okay, so what does this look like? This is a really great little graph for somebody like me, probably not for you guys, but I want to know where are we set for a Fort Collins 2021 COLA and where are we going for a 2030 home? So this was kind of just a model of like some of the things that would be required to get us there. So we talked about that EUI or KBTU per square foot. So Fort Collins homes, I mentioned earlier, you saw that those columns, those blue columns. We're about a detached home is about a 27.4, just under a 28. We're going to get to 2030 in a zero carbon. We're probably going to have to take that down to a negative 3.8 kBtu per square foot. That's with about a 9K of solar on the roof. So important thing here is you can see we're moving to a heat pump. This is more efficient. The SEER is going up, so typical code minimum air conditioner. This is a 90 AFUE furnace, even though they consider those high efficiency. I would say cold climate heat pumps are ultra high efficiency, so a lot more efficient. We're moving ducts out of the attic and into conditioned space. This is really important, really important. Grading of HVAC systems, we're already exceeding this right here. City of Fort Collins has mechanical system performance requirements. We've been doing this for years. FSEC did not include that in this, but I would say we are definitely a 1 right now, so that's not going to be any big lift for the mechanical HVAC industry. Thermostat, non-programmable, again, they kind of modeled like, we don't really know all these homes, but we got to assume that most are probably smart thermostats. Appliances are standard, Energy Star. You know, here we're moving from a typical 0.63 energy factor on a domestic hot water to heat pump efficiency with 3.3, so a lot more efficient there. Often when you go to this though, you might have an additional heating load that you have to overcome, so something to consider. House leakage goes from a 3 to a 2, not big, we can certainly do that. On average, we build between 2 to 2.8 ACH50 houses in Fort Collins. Some builders struggle to still hit 3, they shouldn't, but they do. And windows, you can see a 0.28, which is our current code, going down to a 0.26. SHGC, we're now accounting for a higher solar heat gain coefficient to offset some of the heating load. And you can see this is walls, like an R20 plus an R10 continuous, R20 plus R5. So these are not huge jumps for the building industry to get to 2030 code. I think there's still some things that got to happen. Windows are going to be big, walls are going to be big. Clearly, you know, this is something that we can attack and achieve, but gives you kind of an idea of what this might look like. Again, every builder is going to be different. These are all going to be modeling a little differently, but I think the important thing here is to just realize, like, if we just tweak some things and change the way we do things a little bit, this is achievable. Rhonda.
That PV size on your next line item, that
Right here.
9.6 kilowatt,
Yep.
is that DC size or AC size?
Oh, I don't know the answer to that question right now. I didn't even ask that.
And
Interesting.
a follow-up to that is that what percentage of homes need to have that? Because they can't all have it.
No. Yeah, so this is really important. This is with this. Now, remember, like, we can probably improve the walls considerably here. Builders are building R24 in the cavity right now all day long. That's no thing. Net and glow systems, they don't even, not a big deal. So even right now, some of the things that we're doing, we can get there. We have builders building 0.26 windows, so not that big of a stretch.
But
all of that then begins to lower
Right.
the size of the PV system.
But what percentage of the new homes are you assuming will be able to have solar?
We'll be able to, well, I think we're
100%?
expecting that by 2030, everything built will have some level of PV
Okay.
on it. We'll get to some stuff here in just a second that might be a
Or
little
a
bit interesting.
rooftop big enough for that much, Brad?
What's that?
A rooftop big enough for 10 kilowatts?
Right, not big enough, is it? We're put on average, about a 6K system right now in Fort Collins is what we're building in. So, gives you kind of an idea, 21, detached and attached, kind of the same thing, just gives you kind of an idea. Some changes here a little bit, getting down to an attached house, maybe a 6K system, 9K system. Still, probably not even achievable in an attached house. But again, all of these things are things that we can improve on, and we don't have to push that far to be better than that. People are taking pictures. Got it? Okay. Important to note, none of this is finalized right now. These are all proposed. This gives you kind of an idea of what the trajectory look like from a CO2 index. We know that under the 2024 code, we're probably going to have to start at 50, and then probably going to have it under the 27 code, and then go to a 0 under the 2030 code. More information about what this might look like. This is an all-electric house under the 2024 code to go from 21 code to 2024, detached and attached. I'll just go through this really quick, but you can see as we move from gas appliances here to heat pump here, no PV, and we're achieving this CO2 index of 50. So if we stay with gas, it's going to be a lot harder for builders to hit that CO2 index of 50. So again, we're not banning gas, but this push towards these CO2e targets is going to move people into probably heat pump space and water heating. That's the hope. All right, so if you were to just say, nope, I want to build with gas, this is what it looks like right now. So under the 24 code, to reach a 50, you'd have to put on about 9K of solar on your house. And on a attached house, you'd have to put on 8K of solar. So it gets a little more difficult to hit these carbon emission targets as you go. 27 code, all electric. This is what it looks like. Now, as we build in more efficiency, we increase the efficiency of our space heating appliances. You can see we're starting to now drop in the size of the PV system. So we're getting into a more reasonable size. And then ultimately, here's another gas option just to give people kind of an idea of what this might look like. Again, these are possible, these are proposed, none of this is ironed out, and this will look different for every builder when they model the house. They'll figure that out on their own. But this is just to give people kind of an idea of what this might look like. So 24 code to 27 code, to reach it by building all of this the same, 15K, and we reach a 25. So what does that tell you? Hey, we're going to probably have to improve the envelope a fair amount. So, which is what we want people to be doing anyway. And
So Brad, why don't you start with improving the envelope and then putting PV on? It seems like we're doing this fast afterwards.
well, we're not. So there is an ERI or EUI backstop. So they can only be, they have to still meet an EUI score, energy use per square foot of the house, to model for the heating and cooling loads of the house. So they can't be worse than that. So that EUI score also lowers every single one. So it's two targets, the CO2e and the energy use targets. So the energy use lowers each code cycle as well. Does that make sense? And you cannot use PV to meet your energy use kVt per square foot target. And that's how you'll demonstrate compliance in the envelope. It might be frozen here. Oh. All right. So threw a bunch of graphs and all that kind of geeky stuff at you. So known obstacles, some things we're thinking about. Not all houses have solar access. We get that. Those are some of the things we're going to have to overcome in the city. Houses with solar access may not have enough roof area. Talked about that. 3-story flats, as some people call them, or multifamily homes will have difficulty providing sufficient solar PV access. Some of the things that are going to get us there, heat pump water heaters. Heat pump water heaters require space, and they discharge. These are still obstacles. Cold air, that's something we know we're going to have to overcome. Those things are blasting out about 48, 50 degree air. So you're going to have to provide additional heating to probably overcome that, or think about how you duct those systems. And then also, this will probably be a big impact on all this, and that is how do we provide solutions for ducts all in conditioned space? Some builders are really going to have to adapt to that. So start thinking about the design of homes. And then, of course, affordability. None of this is free, so it is something the building industry is going to have to figure out and adapt as they move along. And of course, everybody knows that affordability is a pretty big topic right now. All right, so to kind of summarize, we do have FYI tools and technology that are available today that can help us reach our zero carbon goal. And somebody in this room should recognize some of the pictures up here on this. A couple of people probably. So this is one thing that I really do like to point out here is as big of a reach as you think this is, we've already done this in Fort Collins, and we have a development that we can show that has done this.
A decade ago.
Yeah. Yeah. We need to develop index methodology and software for calculating this, and we need to train the workforce. So there are going to be people modeling these buildings, but not all of those modelers, I mentioned that earlier, may not have the ability or knowledge right now to do a CO2e calculation. So it's not that difficult, but we'll put that in place for people.
How accurate are the buildings performing to the modeling you've been getting?
Pretty accurate. Yeah. It's been, actually we've known that for some time now because we have quite a bit of modeling data. Like I said, over 50% of all homes built in town are built typically using a performance pad, and that gives us energy use. So for the most part, except for a few outliers, most of it tracks pretty close, and that's one reason we decided to move in this direction.
So the outliers per construction, weak training, or bad
So what we're
software?
finding is we have some outliers, and some of it we cannot account for when we look at energy data. We don't know what's going on in the house. Is there a hot tub? Is there a grow room? Who knows? So there's a lot of factors, but there's a handful of outliers, but for the most part, most track. Sue.
I just want to say Norm Weaver hired, who was it, the Eberle energy modeler? Paul Martin to study our neighborhood of 68 homes with geothermal and solar. And they determined that from the actual data that we actually put more energy on the grid than we use. And so they're performing better than we modeled them to do. And this is 8-year-old data. So.
Yeah. It's great to have this project in town, and honestly, Sue and team and Greg, and kudos to you guys because we still use this project today and reference it. So glad to have it.
What project is that?
The Revive project up North Town. Willocks, if I remember this correctly. College of Willocks. Yep. Ability to adapt CO2 each code cycle. This is really important. So one thing to note is we have these targets. We can adapt these every single code cycle. So as we build homes and we look at the performance of those homes, if we're not tracking to these targets what we're building, then we're going to have to look at why we're not and what do we adapt. Do we change targets? Do we increase efforts for training and resources? It also gives city council and city leadership something to consider. It's how aggressive do we want to get? So we're just giving them the targets. This is what the trajectory looks like. They may not adopt those. So that's something that we'll learn every time we bring this before city leadership. This is really important. We have certainly Florida Solar Energy Center comments on this about half the time we talk about our emissions factors for our grid. They're just you guys have one of the cleanest grids in the entire country. So if anybody can do this, it's you guys. So, and then here's the technology. Cold climate heat pumps. We're getting a lot more familiar with those, and those are going to be super important in reaching these targets. And more HVAC contractors are embracing it, and we've seen some really good installs. Obviously, the challenge is solar access, affordable solutions, and workforce. We're hearing more and more. Ken, you know that. Mark in the room knows that from the discussions that we've had in our community advisory group. Affordability, is an issue, but often industry workforce is part of the problem right now. So we need to bring the industry along right now, and I think we're looking at putting some things in place outside of the building scholarship that will hopefully get us there. So, covered a lot of stuff. Hopefully just high level enough and not too geeky, but happy to answer some questions. And
does any of the code apply to like retrofits or remodels or getting buildings up to date?
so this code does not, outside of the International Energy Conservation Code, have any existing building section of the code. We do have an amendment in City of Fort Collins for additions on homes. So if you build a large addition on a home and that addition is greater than 30% of the existing building, you have to model it and build such that the existing building plus the addition does not use more energy than the existing building did prior to the addition. Really, for the few projects that we've had come through like that, most people freak out at first and then they realize like, oh, we just, while we're blowing the insulation, in our new addition, blow insulation and improve the attic in our 1930s home and maybe insulate the foundation in our 1930s home. And often that's enough to push it over the edge. So it hasn't been as big of a lift as I thought in some of the ones that we saw come across, which is great. There are some triggers, just as an FYI, if you do have, let's say, a commercial building and that commercial building is an insurance office and you want to convert it into a restaurant, that's going to be a change of occupancy. It's also going to increase energy use. Those are two triggers in code. So if there's a change of occupancy, or if this change of occupancy is going to increase energy use, you'd have to bring that building up to the current energy code. So there are some triggers in there that do say, hey, if you're going to really, you get a building that, maybe people are occupying 8 hours a day, and now all of a sudden it's going to be open 24 hours a day and it's going to have twice the occupancy load, and you're upsizing the mechanical equipment, you're probably going to have to do some things to improve the envelope performance of the building. Yeah. So, good question. Yeah, okay. Any other questions?
Just have a question.
Yes.
I'm from Lakewood. Such a long way to go. I know there's
welcome up here.
2018 and trying to deal with 2021, but so with like City of Golden just going net zero, are you guys coordinating at all, like on that frontier, or are you on your own journey and what your experience is?
Yeah, so it's hard to think. So there's a Dr. Cog thing that is kind of surrounding the Denver area, a lot of the communities around there. I do participate in some of those discussions and meetings from time to time. I'm very familiar with all the people that are doing that work. They're also tracking this work. We do have some jurisdictions that have some interest right now in moving towards this CO2e or carbon target, away from zero energy and moving to carbon target, because you begin to remove that bias for fossil fuel and that push towards electrification. I don't know where Lakewood is at though right now.
I'm listening on the planning commission, and there's a lot going on, but I was just part of the AIA Colorado. They had a training for the 2021 to 2024 transition. The area that I'm in, they've got a long way to go to catch up. So
the great thing is about all that, we talked about training, and I will say Colorado Energy Office, if you just do Colorado Energy Office Building Codes Toolkit, if you Google that, they do have amazing training resources on there right now. They're putting a lot of effort into training the building community.
Who are they training?
What's that?
Who are they training?
The building community.
Okay.
So, I should say that they have a whole slew of offerings that, you can't force somebody to take the trainings, but they're making them available and widely known. So if you have some questions about how to do all this stuff, maybe you don't know how to build an envelope that can do X and X and X, you can probably find a training on there and watch a video. There's also, the great thing is they even have almost like a rider program where code officials will actually work with you if a jurisdiction is having a difficult time meeting advanced codes and things like that. So there's a ton of resources out there. They're not as widely used as they would like them to be, but I think that's always been a part of the struggle. It's like getting those people in front of those trainings. So
On that question, it's about the retrofits. That's kind of where I'm at with upgrading and potentially doing solar where you weren't able to before, and doing envelope retrofits. So.
Yeah. I mean, we know that. This is new construction, you know. We have 65,000 plus buildings in town that we need to probably improve. So there's still a lot of work to do for sure ahead of us.
Do you have a guess on the number of new buildings by 2030? Growth numbers?
I mean, it would have been nice to just, if I could have there was some consistency in the permits that we were getting every year, but that has fluctuated quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I think right now we're also going to see a pretty big fluctuation. Like, we're starting to come back, but I suspect that if some of the policy of the federal administration right now, it's going to hurt the building industry. So there's going to be some adjustment for sure.
Yeah.
So I think people are going to be trying to source. I mean, one great example is during the COVID. You know, you had sheathing to sheet a house, 5/8 sheathing. Typically $18 to $20 would be the sheathing. During COVID, that went to $60.
Yeah.
So it got really hard to build houses when prices increased that much.
Do folks in your office talk about prioritizing infill housing and high density?
We do have some stuff in the city of Fort Collins that, in a way, encourage that. We have some transit-oriented development policy, I guess, in place. One of the big benefits there is if they're building in a TOD, you don't have to build as much parking in, which also reduces the amount of electric vehicle infrastructure you have to put in. So I think some people see that benefit as a cost savings for sure. But that is definitely something that we're going to have to tackle. I think we're going to have to probably look at, doing a little bit more.
I was astonished when I heard 300 to 600 houses a year. Like, that's major habitat loss.
Yeah. Windsor builds about 900. So
Windsor doesn't say no to anything.
we also, although we haven't grown much recently, but we historically have been a growing city, so people have to live somewhere. Yeah. Sue, any question?
So, speaking of city council, we haven't been able to get building performance standards passed, and I think it's wonderful that you're leading the way on zero energy buildings and stuff, but what's the chances of this actually getting passed by city council, and what can we do to help you to get this passed by city council?
Thanks. Advocate for it, for sure. Engage, have conversations with people in the community. I think the more people know, I think the less scary it is. I think when people start to see like this move from 2021 code where we're at now to 2024, it's not a huge lift. But if people don't see this right now and you say we're going to start implementation of this under the 2024 code, a lot of people in the community just think we're going to zero in 2024, and that's not the case. We're being intentional about this. We're providing this transparency out to year 2030, right? I want to give the building community time to plan. If I know how I'm building now in 2021 code, how am I going to build in 2024? What steps do I have to take? What do I have to change in the way that I build to get to the 2024 code? Oh, that much? Now I got 5 more years, I got to get to 2030. So they can start to plan a little bit there. So I think that in itself is a bit of a benefit. Now, hopefully, they start to plan for it and start to look at ways that they can adapt. I know there is a builder in town, I won't name them, but that is being really great about that and kind of exploring different ways to sheathe houses and the way they build. So they're considering like, hey, we know what's coming. We need to get ahead of this a little bit. So they're willing to kind of go out and explore different products and things like that. Brian?
I think just a reminder that this will be kind of packaged with the rest of the iCode body of codes.
Yep.
And some of the more controversial or things that City Council is likely to latch on to are this new kind of framework related to performance-based code. Also alignment with state codes and what happens at the state level. There's a lot of discussions at the state. Also, the WUI code, the wildland
urban
interface code interaction, as well as some likely conversation around EV infrastructure. So those are kind of like the 4 key kind of hot topics related to this code package that are, again, packaged onto a single conversation. So we won't have this much time in front of council, unfortunately.
No.
But it's just kind of that interaction between all those, tensions and new, potential controversial items in the code package.
Yeah. And I think one of the things we need to consider with this, there are really big benefits to doing this. And people start talking about affordability. I think you have to look at it from 2 different lenses, right? Attainability and affordability. So, if we get down to a zero energy, zero carbon house, we're going to have very little, minimal utility costs for people that are living in those homes.
My house pays for my water bill, so my solar panel, so it's actually negative.
There you go. We are seeing some alignment and some interest from one in particular housing affordability partner that recognizes this and sees this as a benefit. So obviously they're going to have people living in the affordable housing dwellings, and they want to make sure that there's not an energy cost burden there. And it's really important too that as we improve building envelopes, we're improving comfort. We're dramatically improving comfort. We're making our new buildings especially more grid resilient, building grid resiliency, and we're building more healthy buildings, and that's really important to consider too. I always use the example of our building 222 LaPorte Avenue, which is one of the most efficient commercial buildings probably in the country, certainly in the state. When we had the wildfires, recent wildfires, I'd wake up every morning and my house smelled like a campfire. And I would go into work, and because of that building's performance and how it was built, I would forget until I left to go home that, oh, there's a wildfire burning just west of us and everything smelled like smoke. I didn't get that in the building. So pretty big impacts to health.
I'd just like to briefly share with everyone the possibilities here that are actually happening right now. I have an associate named Matt Chernock in Birmingham, Alabama. And I recently, last fall, toured some of his buildings. He put together 4 buildings with 9 people that were trained by Extreme Technologies, panel technologies, for putting these SIP panel buildings together. 4 men assembled the 1,400 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bath shell in 12 hours. It blew test at 0.4, and the HERS rating they came up with was 24. And less than 2 weeks later, the 9 of them had it turnkey. One of the amazing things that I saw him do in the conditioned attic space was he put the heat pump up in there. It was actually, it's all electric, and it had the cassette up there, the mini split. Mm-hmm. And everything was just simply through the floor, ducted to the individual rooms. And also had heat recovery with dehumidification, because it's zone 3, it's Birmingham. Operating costs for everything, including water and sewer, annually will be $1,100 to the homeowner, is what they're estimating. And the homes are going to be selling now. This is Birmingham. They're going to be selling them for $225,000. So the possibilities are here. We can do this.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Yeah. Industry shift.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, Pete.
And I want to throw something out here, as somebody that, when we talk about the pushback against regulation, but this performance-based regulation, and I worked in DC in the 90s representing industry, including the petrochemical industry, the paper industries. And all we want, our biggest thing was just give us a target to hit. Don't tell us how to hit it. Don't be prescriptive. So I was there that's all we wanted. Now, of course, you give us performance-based, we're still gonna push back.
Just tell us how to build. I'm hearing that. Don't make me, just tell me what insulation. I'm like, what do you want?
But really, that's what they want. They want to have the ability to sit there and say, hey, now I have the choice of, I want to do SIPs. I can do, I can just bulk up my exterior, out of envelope insulation. It allows them to figure it out, and that's, to me, I think, it's hard for industry to push back when you're saying, hey, I'm not telling you how to get there, I'm just telling you where you need to be. And I think that's a strong position, especially in the current environment, because you can go back and you could probably find 100 quotes from NHAB meetings and just say, well, just don't tell me how to get there, just tell me what I need to do.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
you can just turn that
I'm
and excuse it.
going to expect you to shout that from the rooftops. Yeah, thanks. All right. Other questions?
Brad, thanks again.
Yeah.